This is a committee of the whole of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Tuesday, the 21st of February, 2006, right at 5:40 p.m. Councilwoman Bell is present. Councilman Hodge, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Mayor Losner, Councilwoman Wallman, and Councilwoman Garner. We have this evening presentation. Where's my agenda? Do you have one?
Okay, thank you.
We have a presentation by Development Diversified Realty, Development Concept of Homestead Pavilion. Mr. Marcus?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, for the record, my name is Mike Marcus. I'm an attorney, a registered lobbyist with law offices located at 317 North Chrome in Homestead. I'm here today to formally introduce you to a new project that we have named the Homestead Pavilion. I'd like to The developer of this project is, as you had indicated, Mr. Mayor, is Developers Diversified Realty, also known as DDR. In attendance this evening to assist in this presentation, we have directly from DDR, we have Jeff Martin, Gary Sipo, Andrew Zadar, the developer, and from Land Use Council from Gunster Yoakley, we have Spencer Crowley, Neeson Kasdan, the planning consultant from the Curtis Group, Rob Curtis, transportation consultant from Kathy Sweetapple and Associates, Kathy Sweetapple, landscape architect and planner from Gentili Holloway O'Mahony and Associates, Troy Holloway. We have the civil engineer, Carlos G. Balbi, and from Mr. Balbi's office, Alberto Herrera is present this afternoon. And we have the project architect is from the Phillips Partnership is Lisa Bell, no relation to Councilwoman Bell. We have, as you've indicated, Developers Diversified Realty is making this presentation and coming to Homestead and working with Homestead in the development of this very important piece of property located, as we know, the Matheson parcel. I'd like to introduce at this point Jeff Martin from DDR, and he'll proceed with his presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Did everyone receive a packet? Okay. For the record, Jeff Martin, Developers Diversified Realty. Mayor Warren, Vice Mayor Losner, council persons, thank you for your time this evening. I want to stress how excited we are to have the opportunity to work with you all in bringing a regional shopping center to your community. We intend to provide a mix of national retail tenants to service the community and create a situation where the residents of Homestead don't have to leave Homestead to do all their shopping. We believe the project will also significantly boost the economic development within the city, creating jobs, tax revenue, and so forth. So far to date, it's been a pleasure working with the City Manager's Office and the Development Services Department, and we look forward to continue working with them as we move through this process. I guess maybe we can slide through the agenda quickly. Mike has already introduced all the attendees from our group, and now I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Developers Diversified Realty and who we are. So if you're on page 3, company features, DDR has roughly 500 shopping centers in 44 states and Puerto Rico. comprising of about 113 million square feet of retail, which actually makes us the third largest publicly traded real estate investment trust in the country. We have 580 employees. We're based out of Beechwood, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. The next page shows you a geographic breakdown of where all of our shopping centers are located. As you can see, we have high concentrations in the state of New York at about 15 million square feet. In Ohio, we have 8.6 million square feet, and Florida, 7.5 million square feet. The next slide shows you DDR's largest tenants based on GLA, both owned and unowned tenants. And you can read down the list and see Walmart, Sam's Club, Target, Lowe's Home Improvement, Home Depot, Mervyn's, Kohl's, Tops Markets, Kmart, Sears, TJ Maxx and Marshall's, and PetSmart. And the next slide is just, I guess, a colorful rendition of each tenant's logo. Moving on to page 7, this outlines our development pipeline. DDR is one of the largest national retail developers, as well as managers and operators of shopping centers. We currently have a $1 billion development pipeline, which includes about 10 million square feet of retail, and that's nationwide. Projects that we substantially completed in 2005 included Overland Park, Kansas, Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and San Antonio, Texas. And we are anticipating openings of shopping centers in this calendar year in Miami, Florida, Nampa, Idaho, and Apex, North Carolina. The following slides, if you turn the page again, are meant to share with you some of the renderings and pictures of other development projects that we've built or are currently building. The first being a project that some of you may be aware of is our mixed-use redevelopment in Midtown Miami. This is the redevelopment of the former FEC rail yard. It's a 56-acre site located just south of I-195, and it's bordered by the Design District to the north, as well as the Wynwood neighborhood. As I mentioned, it's a large mixed-use development with retail, residential, and office components. And DDR is responsible for building 645,000 square feet of retail. And the tenants that we are bringing to that project that we have announced at this time are Target, Circuit City, Linens and Things, Ross Dress for Less, Marshalls, and West Elm. And the next few slides are artist renditions of that project. We expect the shops at Midtown Miami to open actually in October of this year. And if you have specific questions on the shops at Midtown Miami, we have our Senior Development Director, Gary Sipo, from DDR here tonight as well. The next slide, if you're staying with me, is Beaver Creek Commons in Apex, North Carolina. This is a project that we are developing outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and the picture shown is phase 1 of a larger project, and the phase 1 tenants were PetSmart, Linens and Things, Super Target, and Office Max. Next slide is just another picture of Super Target in Apex, North Carolina. The next project, Hamilton Commons in Mays Landing, New Jersey, is just outside of Atlantic City. And again, I'll run you through some of the national retailers that we have at that project. And they include Target, BJ's Wholesale Club, Kohl's, Dick's Sporting Goods, Best Buy, Babies R Us, Borders, Old Navy, among others. Everyone still with me? The next project is Centerton Square, Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And the tenants that are at this project include Target, Costco, Wegmans, which is a high-end grocery chain, Sports Authority, and Bed Bath & Beyond. I'll try not to bore you with too many more of these. We have a lot, as you can tell. Massaw Park Pavilion, Princeton, New Jersey. It's another multiple-phased project that we are just completing. And the third phase, we just built out a new West Elm store, which is a division of Williams-Sonoma. And this was one of the first 10 stores that they rolled out in the country. And then lastly, we have Ahwatukee Foothills Town Center in Phoenix, Arizona. This is in the major metro market of Phoenix, and it includes AMC Theater, Joann Stores, Steinmart, and Barnes & Noble. This brings us to our renderings for our vision for Homestead Pavilion. Unfortunately, there's not a page number, but the first picture is what we have shown up front on the easel. And this view is looking northeast from Campbell Drive. I don't know if Spencer, if you want to point out maybe on the site plan where the view is. If you look on the site plan.
This is looking northeast through the traffic circle, which is part of the real into the dollar.
Sheila, do we have the handheld mic that they could use? No? Okay. If you all could just use the mic as you're speaking. Thanks.
Can I suggest that since we have it in front of us and the people in the audience don't,
Turn the
that
easels?
we could turn the easels?
Sure.
I don't know if we have that one, Michael. Do we have that particular?
Yeah, we have it.
We have that one? Okay.
Yeah, we have it.
We have a couple more boards that we'd like to show everyone.
At least it's pure commercial. Thank you. Commercial. It's not any shenanigans about housing. That's...
The next rendering, situated below Councilwoman Waldman, is a view looking due south along the main access drive into the shopping center, through the realigned Kingman Road, and down towards Campbell Drive in the background. Flanking on both sides of that main access drive are two multi-tenant shop buildings.
Okay.
And then the third rendering in the handouts is a view from, I guess, Southwest 157th, looking northwest at the larger tenant stores on the north side of the property. And the next page includes our most current working site plan, which changes daily. And this also depicts our landscaping plan on top of the site plan. You will note that DDR proposes to realign Kingman Road, which is Southwest 152nd Ave. And we're currently working with the Turnpike and Miami-Dade County to dedicate approximately 2.6 acres of land to the county for this new roadway. And as you can see on the site plan, we're taking Kingman Road and we're moving the connection to Campbell 600 feet west of its existing location. So we're bringing it up into our property and then traveling south to Campbell Drive. And DDR will be the sole funding entity for that roadway improvement. As we continue along in our packages, the following slides contain our preliminary building elevations, and they move from west to east along the site plan. So we can just skim through these quickly. The first slide includes one of our anchor tenants, and then we have some small shop tenants and junior anchor tenants continuing on down the line. I guess the next slide that I'd like to bring attention to includes the small shop buildings, which we have designated as retail buildings 3, 4, and 5 on the site plan. And those are to occur directly north of the realigned Kingman Road. And that gives you a taste and feel of how those smaller shop buildings will look with some landscaping in front. The next slide includes rear elevations of those same buildings. And what we've tried to show in these elevations is the landscape buffer that we're going to provide, because these buildings will be the back of house facing the realigned Kingman Road. So we're proposing to put a dense amount of landscaping behind those buildings, so you're not seeing service areas.
That's right.
That really that gets us through what I wanted to talk about in terms of who we are and what kind of projects we have going on and what kind of national tenants we have across the country in our portfolio. I guess that brings us to the next agenda item, which I think I'd like Mike to come up and assist me in. But I mean, we'd like to talk about some parking issues that have come up so far in our entitlements, and we've been working with the city staff to modify parking space sizes, and I believe the city is drafting an ordinance to work with us.
We've been working with Susan on this particular issue. We had a meeting just last Friday, resolving, and I'd like to say that the developer has really exhibited a desire to work with the city, and that's really their focus. And the staff has been fantastic in talking to us and working with us, and we had a meeting as recently as Friday to move forward in this project. And we had a couple of, and as you can imagine, something of this magnitude, a development of this magnitude, there'll be items that need to be discussed, and we've had an open dialogue, and we really appreciate that with staff. There was Susan. Is Susan here? Oh, there we go, right there. I can't see. I'm sorry, I got my glasses. Susan, if you'd like to represent to council where we are, and that we discussed that ordinance that we talked about.
I think Rick wants to speak on behalf of staff about the various issues, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that council has.
Rick, thank you, sir.
Yeah. What they brought to Development Services and to DRC was an earlier version of what you've got tonight. What you've got tonight, I think, is a much improved version than the first one, because they've taken a lot of what staff has mentioned, as Mike has mentioned, work with us back and forth. So the product you're seeing tonight that they're proposing is much better than the product they showed DRC, in staff's opinion. One of the items that we need to talk about tonight is the parking. Now, I'm going to frame it from staff's perspective, and obviously I use the phrase you guys tell me what you want to do with it. The parking right now is a 10 by 20, our famous 10 by 20. The developer has indicated that because of, and again, Mike, correct me somewhere along the line if I'm misspeaking, developer has indicated that based on the kind of tenants they're going to have, they're required in their lease arrangements to give so many cars per square foot, which is more than our standard requirements. To give you the scale of what we're talking about, and it gets into the size, that's why I'm putting both things together so you can understand the overall picture, is that they're required by our code to put in something like 1,330 cars, spaces. They're looking to put in just a tad under 1,800. And that's about a 470 more than we're anticipating. So staff's first comment was very concerned that we end up with a big sea of asphalt in front of what is, again, one of the major entrances to the city. What DDR has done in response, first of all, is to put more landscaping than they had before, verify that they will continue with our landscaping code, so everything that we require in landscaping, they will do. But the thing for the size of the spaces, one of the advantages in looking at the 9 by 19 from their perspective, and it's from staff's perspective after last Friday's meeting, is that by going to 9 by 19 and allowing the larger number of spaces, you can still put a little less amount of asphalt. Now, the other thing, in just historical perspective, is that for a lot of the other larger developments, eventually council is given the approval of a 9 by 19. And one of the things staff feels should be at least brought up tonight, in conjunction with this, but not specifically for this, is that maybe we should consider the 10 by 20 and go to 9 by 19. If indeed you want to go that route, Susan has started a couple options in writing it. We're not going to, actually, we have not written it from the standpoint of, obviously you guys tell us if you say it stays at the big size it does. Going to 9 by 19 is a very valid comment based on everything they've mentioned so far and a few things I've mentioned they haven't. Plus we've done it historically in a number of the larger places. So one of the options that Susan and I have talked about is maybe we use the 10 by 20 up to a number. The number right now is still up for grabs, say 100 for the sake of argument, something like that. But when you get into the larger spaces, which are larger numbers of cars, maybe the 9 by 19 is indeed something that's time has maybe come simply from the standpoint of the size. So that's where we are as far as the parking goes. And I think staff, I hope I speak for the rest of the staff, is comfortable with at this point in time to at least bring that forward. Susan did a little preview simply to figure out what we might need to change so that if indeed you tell us to look at it, you're not going to approve that tonight, you tell us to look at it, we would look at it, bring it back later. But at least having an idea of that, you'll know where they're going.
Mayor, council members, just to piggyback on what Rick said, if you recall in the past, even when Charles LeBrad was here, we discussed the 9 by 19. 9 by 19 is still a very decent space for a car to park. It's my understanding, Susan, it's allowed in BUDs, but it's not good.
The current status of the code, because this issue has come up a couple of times in the past, is originally in the PUD you had 9 by 19. Now the status of the code is that residential, whether it's in a PUD or anywhere, is entitled to 9 by 19. So what was discussed with staff was maybe putting before you the policy issue of whether non-residential development in the city should also be able to use the 9 by 19 space. As Rick pointed out, there was a history of council finding it appropriate for certain large-scale development. So whether it be across the board or it only be for large-scale non-residential, we wanted to have that policy discussion with you.
So Mayor, just to finish my thought, we staff think 9 by 19 is a decent parking space, and we recommend that you allow us to proceed in that direction.
I had one more thing. We are not changing the size of the garages. That's a different animal, different thing entirely, so don't go there, please. This is simply about an open sea parking, which, again, Mike is correct. We feel that it is something that merits your thoughts, and if you say go forward, we'll do something accordingly.
Any comments from Councilman?
Question, Mayor.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Mike or Rick, by way of example, either you tell me with certainty and maybe as a good example of a comparison, what are the parking space sizes down at the Home Depot?
Since that's in another municipality, I have no blessed idea, but we can check. BJ's, we did do a 9 by 19.
BJ's, he's 9 by 19, I think that's an example we can all kind of look to.
Also at the hospital, we have a lot of 9 by 19 for the same basic problem. You can have a large area, so but getting their approval at 9 by 19 does help with the size of asphalt per se.
So BJ's is a good example. It's done well, very well, and no problem.
It seems to work, yes, sir.
Yeah, works very well.
Mr. Mayor, Council, and that is a perfect indication of what the experience of DDR has been in their development of projects all over the country, that these national quality tenants, just like BJ's, do require these. They have a list of wants, and if you don't meet their wants, they don't come to your area. And there's, as much as we want them, they have things that they, in their experience, are going to need, and this is one of them. We appreciate you looking at it.
Thank you. Any objection to ask staff to proceed with the 9 by 19, Councilwoman?
I just wanted to ask a question. I'm fine with the 9 by 19, but if you have that space left, are you going to put landscaping in?
I believe that the landscaping issues have been dealt with before, and I don't think there's a problem at all.
Is the plan based on 10 by 20 or 9 by 19?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The plans that we have, are these based on 10 by 20 or 9 by 19?
9 by 19.
Oh, okay. I thought there was going to be extra space.
But Mrs. Garner, Ms. Garner may add, they have, since the first pass, put more green in it, and they've played with the green in terms of getting more in there, laying out their parking, sliding them around, so that the one we have now does use, in that drawing, 9 by 19, but it does have all the landscape required by code, and they have promised me, and I'm going to hold them to it, that they meet the landscape code, especially since we're playing around with giving a little bit of break as far as the parking goes. So the end result is going to be what's on that drawing. That's going to be very nice.
What about the lighting? Is that in conformity with the code?
I'm glad you asked that, sir.
Lighting programs?
We have a different animal here, but we have an animal that I'm relatively comfortable with. Let me explain from this standpoint. Our typical fixture is a single or a double-headed acorn type of fixture. It is not, as we used to say many times, a light on steroids. It can only do so much. These guys need more light based on the requirements from the developers or from the tenants. And what they propose, if you look, this is a larger version, but it's also in your drawings. This is going to be the fixture. If you look at, not so much this picture, but if you look at the picture of the third one of the series of perspectives, it shows them in there. And what we've come up as far as, again, a compromise is that we're expecting to put the regular city fixtures on the perimeter and on the out parcels and put this fixture inside. Now this fixture, and again this time Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, will have essentially the same pole that we have, the same base that we have, the same arm that we have, but the fixture itself is one that, because it doesn't have, it's got a recessed fixture, it's inside as opposed to the outside, you're going to get a much better light on it. And so again, we feel that this will give us a lot of the original thesis of the ordinance and allow it to work from the standpoint of the foot candles that we require. And if indeed we talk about this, and again, you're relatively comfortable with this, we may look later at adjusting it for the same thing so that we can use that in main fields and use ours around the perimeter.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, and I've seen poles and very similar to this, and you've heard me talk about Baldwin Park at the Publix that is located there that has the enhanced lighting standards. In my view, these poles meet the aesthetic intent that we had in adopting the lighting standard while providing for the safety and requirements and the tenant's requirements that their in-house council require for foot candles. So I am very satisfied with what's being presented here.
And this is another good example, seriously, and I know this sounds like it's canned, and I apologize for that. We've worked very well with the developer, and they've tried to work very well with us, and rather just coming in and say no, they came in with an alternate solution that we find really does meet the intent, as Mr. Osmond said, of what we did in the first place with the ordinance. So again, I think the lighting as they presented now is really another good marriage in terms of what we want, what they'd like to do, and everybody gets 90% of what they want to do.
Ms. Roman?
I'd like to compliment staff and your combined team of professionals is beautiful, absolutely beautiful, top-notch. And it's so nice to have something brought to us that you've already worked with staff and taken your time to work out the problems before, there's controversy here on the dais. So it's wonderful, beautiful.
Continue on with the presentation, Mr. Mayor, if I may. We have Rob Curtis and Spencer Crowley that would like to make a presentation with regards to the Regional Activity Center proposal. And then we'll, after that, Mayor and Council, we stand ready to answer any questions that you may have.
This guy, I've never seen it.
Good evening, Commissioners. Spencer Crowley, 2 South Biscayne Boulevard, Miami, Florida. What I'm going to address with you all this evening is the Regional Activity Center, which is known by its acronym RAC. When we first approached the city with DDR's proposed development plan, city staff understood that this area around the Campbell Drive Homestead Extension interchange was experiencing rapid growth, and that a more in-depth planning effort for this area could be warranted and beneficial to the city. The area surrounding the interchange is really going to be a focal point of growth over the next 5 to 10 years for the city of Homestead, with the proposed Baptist Hospital, various medical office buildings, and a significant amount of retail use proposed for the area. Because of this proposed growth, or anticipated growth in the area, we actually suggested that city staff consider designating the area within the red line there on the exhibit as a regional activity center. City staff considered this request, this suggestion, and after discussions, they've agreed to act as the applicant to apply to DCA to have this area designated as a regional activity center. The sort of breakdown of how that will work mechanically is our team will be providing technical assistance throughout the application process, and the city will act as the applicant mainly so that the city retains control of the process. It's a city-initiated planning event, and the control is vested with the city throughout the process. What is a RAC? A RAC is essentially a land use overlay designation that allows elevated DRI thresholds. The theory behind a RAC is a DCA, the State Department of Community Affairs, will review the RAC area one time instead of potentially reviewing each project separately within the RAC. That gets to the next point. Why designate the area as a RAC? And the first and most important point is that the designation of this area as a RAC will allow the city to retain control of development within this area. The city essentially will be in control of its own destiny and will not have to answer to DCA, will not have to answer to the Regional Planning Council every time a development comes up. The city's zoning, the city's land use will control, and it just sort of removes one step of bureaucracy from the process. Just to give you an example, DDR's Phase 2, which is, under the current situation, would be developed sometime in 2008 or 2009, would be bumped up to be developed within, 2007 if the RAC were approved. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what the RAC, what kind of effect the RAC would have. There's certain statutory requirements for the RAC. We've reviewed those with council, and this site is really a textbook a textbook rack. It follows the statute just perfectly. As far as the process for designation, what we're going to be able to do is present an ordinance to DCA that will be passed on first reading by City Council. That ordinance will then be sent up to DCA, reviewed by DCA for 30 days, and if DCA finds that the proposed ordinance, along with our backup application, meets the intent of Florida law, then the Regional Activity Center designation will go into effect, and at the next point in time when the city amends their comprehensive plan, which will be sometime in late summer, early fall of this year, that Regional Activity Center designation would be adopted formally by City Council as part of the comprehensive plan. So we think it's a really great fit. After discussing the issue with staff, I think they're in agreement that this is a good idea. It's something that the jurisdictions around South Florida are now looking to in order to sort of streamline their development process within their own cities. So that's kind of the rack in a nutshell. If you have any questions, certainly be happy to field them at this time.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I'll ask the question to our attorney. In looking at what lies within the boundaries of the proposed Regional Activity Center and knowing the development approvals that we have already given, I have to question the rationale that's being given for the designation tonight, because other than the subject property and the Baptist Health property lying south of Campbell Drive, most of this property within the boundary already has development approvals, and much of it is already under construction. So what then would be the real underlying rationale for pulling this out of, or putting it into the rack and then taking it out from the purview of DCA? Is the characterization really accurate?
Well, there is a process streamlining component to the RAC, no question. This is a very unique process of being able to adopt an ordinance and basically get DCA to pre-approve your plan amendment and then follow the plan amendment process afterwards. That's in essence what happens with this process.
So let me interject then. So this project then will require a plan amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, there will be a plan amendment. What the process does is sort of kickstart it. And all of the rationales and the analysis and the data that are necessary for the RAC plan amendment would be there with that ordinance that goes up to DCA at the beginning, as Spencer explained. And then there's a 30-day time frame for DCA to review it and say this meets or does not meet the intent of the RAC. And at that point, the entitlements or the rights under the RAC, they can act on those even though the remainder of the plan amendment process follows.
Okay. Well then, for properties other than the subject property, once they're under the RAC designation then, would it give them the benefit to shift gears and get a plan change without having to pass muster in Tallahassee?
The way that the RAC will be proposed, and I think, do you have a small version of the boundaries? Okay, good. I think the intent is to basically reflect the vested rights that exist on the other properties that are within the red boundary. Certainly staff can explain their feel of why this is a good or not a good fit for the city. But as Spencer said, it's a major transportation interchange, and many of the aspects of the RAC as it's described in the statute do seem to be met by this location.
But the question was, would it allow some land use changes on other parcels?
Not without your consent.
I understand that, but there may be a higher authority that would be circumvented as to other potential applications.
Well, it's not really circumvented because they have that period. It's really just that DCA is agreeing to do it more quickly and not wait until the rest of the...
So it's not a cutting out of the review. And
I think it's a streamlining at the DCA level of the time that's involved in their review of that.
And if I may, Mr. Vice Mayor, it's one way to look at it is you get DCA to review it up front. They review it one time, and you know, if what we're proposing doesn't make sense to DCA in terms of the amount of infrastructure and the planning that goes into it, then they'll deny it, and we have to, you know, start at square one. But the intent is to take it to DCA, have DCA review it once, and then sort of bless it and cut the city loose to you know, streamline the process so that every development that goes through, you know, if in 10 years one of these developments wants to develop part of their surface lot, and there is a different development plan, those developments will come to you for approval only, and they won't have to go through DCA, the Regional Planning Council, et cetera.
Just to the extent that the
Up to certain
RAC that
amounts,
is
that's
approved
correct.
would include that. So you're in control the whole way. This is a very common option in Broward County in particular because it helps you to get your one blessing from the county commission, which controls land use up there. And then the city thereon can just make decisions within this big box. So it's a similar kind of thing, but with regard to the state here in Dade County.
No, I understood that at least as to this project, Tallahassee had their one bite at the apple and it was back to us. So my concern is does it allow others to do something that they might not otherwise be able to do without passing through Tallahassee? The other parcels within the RAC.
Well, it would allow the other parcels to develop up to a certain threshold without going through that review. So let's say the hospital, for instance, you know, tomorrow Baptist decides, look, we don't need a hospital, we want office buildings there. They could build up to a certain threshold, and then they would have to be reviewed by DCA and Tallahassee again. It just sort of elevates the thresholds to a reasonable level that would allow the streamlining. And in fact, in our proposed Regional Activity Center guidelines, there will be sort of caps on the maximum amount of development that can occur within the RAC, and we will be working with city staff and all the landowners in the area to make sure that those numbers are acceptable to everyone.
And I think that's the basic protection for the city. You're going to have this summary of development rights within this big square. And you'll be able to look at the underlying pattern of development and the vested rights that exist there that will be part of it. It won't be on top of that. I think that's the concept that staff and the developer have been discussing. It's the vacant parcels that would be representing the new development within the area. Am I correct in characterizing it that way?
I'm not 100% sure. So let me try my take and see if I can maybe answer your question, Mr. Lausner, and see if it works. First thing, I believe that, and Spencer, please correct me if I'm wrong, the Homestead Pavilion as presented, as shown on the drawing, does not need the RAC. It can continue forward on its own. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
The advantage to the RAC as Spencer proposes, is that it will capture the entire area within the red lines and allow, based on the amount of capacity we build into that RAC, which obviously staff and Susan will look at to make sure we're not overdoing things or doing things that actually hurt us in the long run. We'll then allow, once that thing goes, to take their phase 2, can move a little bit faster. If things change at Baptist Hospital South and they want to do something a little bit different, but still within the same confines of what they've been doing, that may move a little bit faster. There are not really, I think you're correct, all that many other players that will be affected by it. I don't know how this plays out relative to the transportation issue. We need to discuss that, 'cause that's going to be a big issue. I believe, underlying belief, because I'm not that familiar, and Spencer can correct me if I'm wrong, that the RAC will help us looking at the Turnpike extension and the whole thing from the standpoint of how it should all fit together. Does that actually do that, or am I dreaming in that one?
No, that's correct. It'll give the city a chance to take a sort of holistic look at the area within this boundary, and to the extent that certain improvements need to be made and either haven't been planned or funded yet, I think the process will help identify the issues that need to be resolved to get the correct infrastructure in place. So I think what you get out of the RAC is a sort of here's what this area is going to be in 5-10 years. Here's the infrastructure that needs to be in place, and here's our roadmap to get there. And I think that's an accurate characterization.
I guess what I want to ask you, sir, is did I answer your question or not? If not, we'll try it again. I don't want to have you confused.
I was understanding it when I was under the impression that you needed a plan amendment in order to do this project. That made sense. And now you tell me that as a matter of right, this project can go forward without a plan amendment or without review from DCA.
Let me see if I can answer that and make sure. Again, Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong. As the plan is now, it can go forward as a right. And that's when you look at the sign-out time, it's, I think, 600, the last three digits are 399. It basically keeps it to what they can do now without going through a DRI and a lot of other stuff. The rack is another way to get to the end of having more of the space around it, having an overlay to give you an overall capacity of what you'll put in there without going to DRI, which makes a lot longer time. It's kind of an interim step. So again, going into the rack basically will not affect this project as such. It does affect Phase 2 and it affects anybody else around it in terms of how that may help with everything else we're doing with DCA. The other way you maybe look at it, and again, Susan, correct me if I don't mix the wrong metaphors, when we did the PUN for the southwest neighborhood, we basically created a big box. If you look at the map, it's actually a big blue box where the one went around it. Once we did that, that allows us to play within there without going back to DC every time we want to change something in there, because we've gotten that entire piece and we're able to figure out how the pieces go inside. This, I believe, is very similar. Am I correct, Susan?
It is a similar concept. Looking at the site plan that's in the PowerPoint that they handed out, if you'll notice, there is property that is not proposed for development at this time, both to the east and to the south. And those are the areas, the future phases, that would be affected most by the rack.
Which are you looking at?
The large site plan, which is, it's not numbered, but it is in here.
It's the separate large sheets?
It's this.
These?
No, it's this. So what you're looking at in peach, which is the buildings, is part of what they can do today without the rack or a plan amendment. But look at all of the property that's left between that and the gray road at the bottom, which is Campbell Drive, and then to the east, it's actually cut off.
Well, it's at 660 feet, I think somebody threw out 660 feet of depth between Campbell Drive and the back of those smaller three buildings.
Those are some of the key vacant properties where the rack would come into play, and you'd specify how many development rights you'd want to allow for that development.
Just to clarify again, Mr. Vice Mayor, the Phase 1 as proposed is 399,000 square feet. That is just below the 400,000 square foot threshold for DRIs for a retail development. So when Rick says it may proceed as of right, that's what's allowed, allowed under the code and allowed to proceed without going through the DRI review. The Regional Activity Center designation, if approved by council, would act to elevate that retail threshold from 400,000 to 600,000 square feet of retail development. It would have the effect of allowing Phase 2 to be developed really as part and parcel of Phase 1. It would sort of integrate the development of the center as one, rather than having to have DDR develop Phase 1 and then sell off the out parcels to some other developer, or to wait, a period of time, 2 years, 3 years, to develop the remaining out parcels. So that's really the sort of impact on this development and the phasing that I think was probably a little bit unclear.
Well, and that's what I wasn't clear on, is that there were additional phasing beyond the buildings that were shown that would kick you into DRI review.
That's correct, that's correct.
You're probably paying the price of these questions for all the shysters, hucksters, and con men who have come before you with far less projects. And I'm always looking for the devil in here, because believe me, a lot of men and women have stood at that point before you. I don't know who remembers the open-air yellow-tinted flea market that somebody wanted to put on this 60-acre parcel. So it kind of, threw up red flags when you're telling me, wait a minute, we want to do more development without more review later. And I don't think the point was made until just a minute ago that it was for the balance of this parcel.
That's right. That's right. And I do have to say that your staff has been incredibly supportive and thoughtful on this issue, and to the extent that that the city has a sort of check and balance in this, I really believe that your planning staff and your city attorneys are doing the city justice and serving the city well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, are there any other questions on the Homestead Pavilion shopping development? At this time, we stand ready to answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question. Any ideas of any stores that might be interested in this?
Yes, I can field that question. I tried to give you a sense of the type of national retail tenants that we deal with on a daily basis, and in my earlier presentation, I think we can expect to see similar tenants, national, well-known retail tenants. They're already jumping at the bit to be at this location. They're very excited about being here. Unfortunately, I can't name specific tenants at this point.
Well, she has some in mind. Would you mind if
I'm happy to sit down.
And if you can't answer the real question of who's going there, I mean, with all of the shopping centers and facilities that you own or manage, you have a spectrum.
Sure.
Clearly, you've done some demographic and economic studies of Homestead. Where in that spectrum would you expect those stores to fall? I mean, there's still a lot of people with the mentality that, well, it's just Homestead, and I think we've got to guard this as our gateway. I mean, certainly that hospital is going to be an icon. And I go back to the example of the guy that wanted to put the tent roof, yellow tent roofed open-air flea market on this very parcel. We've got to be very mindful of what welcomes people to the city of Homestead and what will be our main intersection of this community.
Completely understood, and quite honestly, that's DDR's responsibility, is to disprove that myth of the old Homestead, and I mean that's why DDR purchased this property. We feel that Homestead's come a long way from where it once was. Not necessarily that was a bad thing, but we want to.
Good move. Very good.
We fully understand.
You're worth whatever they're paying you.
The tenants have to hear it from us, and then they have to come down on site visits and see the type of residential growth that's occurring. Certainly the hospital across the turnpike is a huge selling point as well. So I don't anticipate any problems attracting those large-scale national tenants that we call our book of business.
Large-scale, upscale.
Sorry?
That's right.
Upscale.
I'm be happy to be a shopping consultant for you.
Duly noted.
I've got a reputation here in the council.
We had a major discussion months ago about this research that I think Councilman Hodge and the Vice Mayor and Ms. Bell, would that research would be helpful to these gentlemen in terms of...
Definitely. That's really was the whole intent.
But I think what they're saying is they've already done their retailers have done their research.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the retailers have to do their own research. I mean, we can provide them with as much information on demographics and whatever we have, but I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, they do their own market research, and we've been receiving positive feedback from these large national retailers so far.
Councilwoman Bell?
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of piggybacking off of your statement that the company that Mr. Laws or Mr. Hodge and myself had looked at, basically does this. They pretty much do the demographics of the area, not solely based on financial, but based on numbers, how many people drive by this particular exit, getting off the turnpike and passing by here this X amount of times a day, many different qualifications. But what I wanted to say is, and I think that would have been very helpful for them to draw some big names here to realize that we can contain that we can actually support that. I think that the residents of the community and the east side, and listening to a lot of the east side and what the residents have to say is they are looking for more commercial. They are looking for the component, the commercial/industrial component, not the housing component, but the commercial component. And this is something that I think will be very palatable to the community and very welcomed to all of Homestead. And I think that this would be a plus. I think this would be a plus for us, always taking into mind, which I can tell you've already taken care of, is traffic concerns because of all of the traffic that's going to be dumped off of Kingman and all the people that use Kingman. So I realize that has been taken into account after taking a look at this. So I think that we're going to get good feedback from the residents of the City of Homestead as a whole, as well as the east side. Thank you.
Appreciate that, and we would like to see whatever information you could provide to us. That would still be very helpful.
We would like to provide it for you too, but...
Thank you.
Mr. Hodge?
Yes, and just to kind of add on, and maybe we can sit down and talk in a little bit more detail about it later. Basically what they did a little bit more in detail, not only did they look at the drive times and the distance, but they also looked at the spending habits of the individuals in the area. So they really did a detailed research, and they really didn't, basically what they did the research on that particular area, and then they'll come back with a list of retailers that would be successful in that area, and then they say, okay, which ones would you like to see here? You give them the names, and they put together the marketing package for them, and then we would still go out and talk to those individual retailers, as well as they would probably want to do their own research to do it, but the information that we would give them would be basically the same research that they would find out anyways. And it's just helping to get to the yes a little bit quicker, and that way we have a little bit more insight on maximizing the use of the property, which I know you guys want to do anyways. So it was just an economic way of doing that and getting the highest impact for the area. And I understand that you may have a team of retailers that may exercise your services, often, but then this may get the opportunity to maybe look at some outside the rim, and who knows, you may build a partnership that you may not have right now that may be valid for you in the future. So it would be a great idea to sit down and take an opportunity to look at that, and maybe we can work something out on that.
Look forward to that.
Ms. Garner?
Thank you. I'm sure all the residents are going to be excited, or as excited as we are when they hear about this. Can you give us a timeline as to when you think construction could start and how long it would take?
We're actually hoping to be in the ground this summer, starting to do some site work, and then we're driven largely by these national tenants and how many opening dates they had per year. And right now we're targeting a summer opening of 2007.
Oh, great. So. Please target the bookstores. Everybody tells me every day we need bookstores.
That's certainly a tenant we'll focus on.
Okay. One thing I do have a concern about, Kingman Road, I understand you're realigning it, which is actually going to benefit us, but during the construction period, are you going to be doing anything with that? Because a lot of the residents on the east side where I live use Kingman Road to get away from that school zone. If you cut back through that neighborhood, you can get away from the school zone without having to go through there.
We will be required to maintain service on Kingman Road throughout construction, so the new Kingman Road reline will be built before the old Kingman Road is disrupted.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Marcus, thank you all very much. We look forward to first-class project, commercial project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. And we have an opportunity, I think, to bring some national quality tenants to retail facility that we're all going to be proud of, because we're all going to have input. And I told them they were asking about a bookstore.
And a tremendous amount of job opportunities.
Thank you.
That's right, that's right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Anything for the group, Ms. Bell? Mr. Howard? Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Warman? Ms. Garner? Mr. Manager?
No, Mayor.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.